from the Premier League, which broke yesterday. Everton have received an immediate 10-point deduction after they were found to have breached the Premier League's profit and sustainability rules. The punishment is the biggest sporting sanction in the competition's history and leaves Everton 19th in the table on a new total of just 4 points. Ashley, as a former Everton player, what were your thoughts when you heard yesterday?
Shocked, really. I think that it seems a little bit excessive. I think everyone around the club was a little bit shocked. They didn't expect that. We've not seen it before. Not to get into the details of the whole thing, so I don't know the ins and outs of it, but it just seems like that's a lot of points to take away from a team when it seems like Everton were playing ball and trying to open their books and show what they have and haven't done and how they can work it out, and then to be hit with that seemed, as I say, a little bit excessive, I felt.
Yeah, and it moves them right down into that relegation zone, joint level with bottom of the table. They had been doing really well on the pitch. They looked like they built a bit of momentum. How do you try and ensure it doesn't affect the players?
It's a tough one because it's a big shock, isn't it? But I think, obviously, you've got to focus on the football. You've got to listen to the manager. But your mind is going to kind of focus a little bit on that at the same time. But I think ultimately they've got to get some points now. It's a big deduction, but they've got to fight now to stay in that league.
I'm sure they will fight as well. Well, Joe Thomas, the Everton correspondent from the Liverpool Echo, joins us now to discuss this further. And Joe, just give us a little bit more context and background to this story and why Everton have been hit with such a big sanction.
Well, essentially this comes to an argument over accounting, and over the period that was monitored and scrutinised, Everton could have lost up to £105 million without facing severe sanction. Premier League independent commission that judged on this case found that they lost £124.5 million. So it's an argument over that £19.5 million, which the Premier League and the commission both say is a very serious breach. Warrants a very severe sanction. Now, the headlines argument around this look mainly around what are really financial specifics and technicalities. But what this is essentially a verdict upon from the Premier League, I think, is it's a judgment on the spending under the years of Everton's majority shareholder, Farhad Moshiri, who, when he came in about 7 years ago, embarked on a course with the club where he wanted to fund the playing side to get back into Europe, get the club into Europe. Once it got there, it became more sustainable from a footballing operation. But he also had the dual ambition of building a new stadium. And as a result of that, Everton got into a few financial difficulties. The Premier League essentially says that it flew too close to the sun, took too many risks based on sporting performance that didn't materialise on the pitch, as we've seen with the relegation battles of recent years. Everton, on the other hand, they kind of say that they were hit by, buffeted by a series of unfortunate and unpredictable circumstances which hampered their ability to stay within the rules. And as soon as they realised that there were problems afoot, they opened up with the Premier League, engaged with them in their bid to try and stay compliant with the regulations. That's where the argument largely came down to. The independent commission essentially came down on the Premier League side.
Well, in response to the news, Everton released this statement yesterday. The club does not recognise the finding that it failed to act with the utmost good faith, and it does not understand this to have been an allegation made by the Premier League during the course of proceedings. Both the harshness and severity of the sanction imposed by the Commission are neither a fair nor a reasonable reflection of the evidence submitted. The club will also monitor with great interest the decisions made in any other cases concerning the Premier League's profit and sustainability rules. And Joe, like the statement says, that this could have ramifications out with just Everton. But if we stick to Everton right now, what happens next for them?
Well, Everton have already launched an appeal, so they're going to fight this. Their position, as is reflected in that statement, is one of dismay, really, at this. Obviously, they knew that a punishment was coming because by the end of the commission, which finished at the end of last month, there was an acceptance from them that they'd broken the rules. There was an argument over by how much money, but they accepted that they'd broken it, and therefore they knew something was coming. And there was a fear within the club that it would be a serious sporting sanction. But I think there was a real shock and surprise yesterday when the severity of the punishment was announced, and that is really that's leading their charge from this. They're appealing that. They're appealing the nature because they don't believe that a sporting sanction, a points deduction which affects things on the pitch, should be warranted for what they essentially say is a technical accounting breach. And if you get to the point where a sporting sanction is deemed a necessity, they're saying 10 points. Where on earth has that come from? The largest points deduction in Premier League history. There's a real sense of feeling that they're being made an example of, and they're challenged on the basis of that.
Well, the Commission said in their findings that Everton are in this position of their own doing and that their capability is great. So on what grounds do you think they will appeal, and how likely is an appeal to be successful?
Yeah, well, the appeals findings are clear, and I think it's probably important to note that the club isn't pleading innocence now. And I think when you see the anger and the frustration from the fan base, I think there's an acceptance from among the fans that Everton is a club that hasn't been run particularly well over recent years, and that it has breached these sanctions. It's the severity of it that's the issue. In relation to Everton, obviously they're not appealing from a position of saying that we're not guilty anymore. So what they're doing is they're going to hope to reduce the sanction, I think, is the best case scenario, by saying that there are lots of mitigating circumstances which haven't been fairly taken into account here. Things that the club couldn't have predicted when it was embarking on these ambitions of starting to build a new stadium, trying to fund the team to get into Europe. And I think they're asking for a bit of leniency to say, look, we tried to be honourable and go to the Premier League and open our books ahead of this becoming a situation. All right, we have failed to act and be compliant within the regulations, but when you take everything, the wider context of what's happened, the club said they've been buffeted by things like the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the effect of the COVID pandemic and how that depressed the transfer market, in their opinion, and how just a handful of these things perhaps going as was predicted, all it would have taken is one of them to have unfolded as expected for Everton to come within the rules. And I think they're saying, based on that and based on their proximity to the threshold and these extraordinary circumstances that affected them, surely a little bit more leniency is warranted in this case. And they'll hope to bring that 10 points deduction down quite considerably. Whether or not they will, is doubtful. Obviously, the Commission have been quite stern in their findings. They seem to agree with the Premier League that this is a serious breach, that Everton took risks based on, they gambled on a sporting performance that didn't materialise, and as a result of that, they deserve serious punishments.
Joe, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. So with Chelsea facing fresh allegations and Manchester City also referred to an independent commission by the Premier League, this looks to be just the start of a far bigger story in English football. We'll be keeping right across it all as it develops right here on Football Focus.